hearing and what we're hearing is that, you know, providers were not meeting our 10-day of getting the checks out to providers. We're working with our fiscal services actually yesterday to come up with a plan of how to get caught up by the end of the week. But we definitely encourage the providers to call us or email, and we all have access to look up and let them know, you know, where their payment is in the process, if it's still in process, if it's been issued. The other thing that you may be hearing is that yesterday we sent out an email for their first report to get that second payment, which of course is, I haven't gotten my first payment, some of them, do I need to fill this out? And the message is definitely fill this out, even if you don't have your contract award finalized or signed. You won't get your second payment if you don't fill that out. Filling that out will not mess up anything within the first payment or the contract. It's simply a reporting. So encourage them to get that in, and that they will get that check will be issued at the end of June. Another piece, and we sent this out to give you guys a heads up last week, was that the approved notices went out Friday. That's, I think, hence the email and the phones are pretty, lot of questions on why I wasn't approved. You know, we didn't do an individual, it was a pretty, you know, general statement. And so providers are encouraged, when you're talking with them, they can call and we can tell them why. A majority of the reasons that someone was not approved is that they did not have their emergency childcare application submitted by April 8th. That's a large portion of them. So if some were on the 9th, the 10th, so that's kind of the bulk of the questions that we're hearing. With that, I'll stop and see, are there any other questions that you guys are hearing from the field that maybe I could help give you guys some answers to?
If anybody has a question, go ahead and raise your hand. I think I can see most of the folks that are on camera. Yeah, Karen Hinkemeyer.
Oh, I had to find mute. Hello. Not questions from providers, but I was just wondering if there was going to be a third batch of awards that were going to be sent to us. I thought there were still some stragglers that we didn't receive. And then the second thing is, are we also able to get those that weren't approved?
So I'll need to check on that third batch to see how we can get that to you. You guys received an email with the first and second batches? Okay, yep. We'll work to get that to you. The batches are smaller now, I believe, but yeah, I'll talk to Katie about getting that part of the process. And yes, we can send you those not approved. I know that through that process, we found a few that are, I should say 2 that should have been approved. And so we're making those changes if that's based on the data. So I can get you that list.
Thanks for that, Dawn. Were there other questions? Yeah, go ahead, Karen.
So I just really think it would be amazing if we could do this. I'm not sure if we can, but from my perspective and my team's perspective, we really want those that didn't get phase 1 monies to get phase 2, right? But there isn't an easy way to, unless somebody knows it, to get information from NACRA and then cross-reference it with those that received the grant. If we could have the individuals who did not receive it, I know that we would want to contact them and really support them in making sure that happened. But just putting that out there, if it's possible, that would be wonderful.
So you're wanting, just so that I understand, you're wanting a list of all licensed providers who did not receive a grant.
Right. And that would help us, you know, because from my perspective in Washington County, I want as many ECC programs to open up prior to September, right? And so, yes, I could call those that aren't currently ECC programs and maybe just go that route. But I kind of like to get an idea of what would our next steps be as an R&R to best support those that did not get that first phase. And because all of us want to increase the number of ECC programs opening so that we're not in such a deficit come September.
Yes, I will ask about that, Karen. So it's
Okay.
all licensed that they, not just that weren't awarded, but that did not apply.
Right, exactly.
Interesting. Yeah, we've had a few individuals hoping to get a hold of that group that were not awarded, but that did submit. So if that list is available, that would be great. And I think Karen's additional ask is also helpful. So other? Oh, hey, Karen.
I apologize. So, you know, the CARES funding is coming to the counties, and they're asking some R&Rs, you know, how do we make sure that those that did not get that first phase grant have an opportunity to get this grant, right? So I'm just trying to figure out how we can make sure that all providers get some kind of a focus. And those that didn't fall into the statewide monies fall into the county. And I don't know if that's possible, but I'm just letting you know what we're hearing and how to support those that haven't received funding.
And John, Christine has a similar question.
Yeah, I see Christine's asking if we can get a list of the folks that have not claimed but were notified that they could receive the award. Is that something, Dawn, that we have data on folks who haven't followed through after they've been notified?
Yeah, and we actually went and called every single person to get them. So we've done that follow up with those individuals that have not done that, whether it was why haven't you responded to this? So I think we've taken care of that part of it.
That's great. Just out of curiosity, do you have a sense for why were they folks who just didn't check their email, or was it a little bit of people who didn't want any money because they were just fine, or?
No, it is interesting. There have been people that have declined the grant for various reasons. But I think a lot of it was they not used to checking their email.
Interesting.
And so we had a team of 2, and then we had language support as well to call everybody to help them get into their inbox and check in with them.
Well, that was great that you guys were able to do all that follow up. Fantastic. And do I see any other hands waving that I've missed? You guys are really small on my screen right now, but I still see you all. Just smiles, good. A couple people frowning. I won't call you out. So any other questions for Dawn, or Dawn, any other updates related to next steps on grants, or?
Yeah, just to kind of move on to phase 2. So that opens up on Monday, June 22nd. And this is available, I'm sure you guys have seen it, for licensed programs and regulated subsidy receiving ERDC. I think there's been some confusion of people that I've talked with that it's not just that you have to be listed, but you actually have to have a child that is you're caring for receiving ERDC to be eligible. One of the things that I know frustrated a lot of providers in the phase 1 is with the SurveyMonkey Apply that we were using, they sometimes didn't get it submitted, even though they thought they had. And so we're encouraging providers, once they've think that they've submitted, if they're not sure, particularly those who were not successful in phase 1, to give us a call, and we can look into the system and let them know if it was submitted or not. We're hoping we have a webinar scheduled for the Saturday for providers on the grant application. And I know that we were talking about putting in, that green submit button is like a really critical part of it to be able to submit it, because it will let you close out, but not necessarily submit the application. And so with that, any questions about phase 2? That's kind of straightforward of where we're at with that.
Not seeing any hands raised.
Yeah, John, Eva has a couple of questions. Eva, do you want to go ahead and ask your questions, please?
Yeah, sorry. I'm not familiar with the raise the hand piece on here yet. So my questions are, if we have a provider who is exempt, like a Parks and Rec program, and they're not accepting ERDC, are they not eligible for phase 2? And then the second question is, how much money is allocated out of the federal money for phase 2?
Oh, so one, yes, they're not eligible. The Parks and Recs, you have to be licensed or license exempt and having a child on ERDC. Now, if it's a Parks and Rec and they have a child on ERDC, that's a different story. But just in and of itself, they're not eligible. The second question is, $10 million, Joan, does that sound right? I think is allocated for this next phase 2 is a number I've seen. And the award amounts are the same that we were able to award in round 1. So they adjusted down a little bit to align with phase 2. I think another point, and maybe we pointed that out before, is that it's now a 2-class limit. And that's purely budget purposes. I think maybe Betsy talked about that when we were on the call last time.
This is Joan. I just want to say that, yes, we were approved to spend, I think it was $10 million on these phase 2 grants. And I think that's another thing, just to reiterate, every step of this, like, we have to get approval at the highest levels of government to spend these funds. So these are not ELD decisions. They are really decisions being made by the Legislative Fiscal Office, the Chief, Financial Officer, the Governor's Office. So just to keep that as a larger frame for this in terms of how decisions are being made about spending these individual sums of money.
All right, I hear somebody breathing or whispering. I think that's probably just not a question. And Lynette was asking if a program has opened a second classroom, can they apply again for phase 2? So I'm assuming open the classroom after the original period.
Nope, they are not eligible. It would need to be another site. And I know I've talked to some particularly certified families that, with the temporary order, we were able to, they can offer 2 stable group size potentially, but they would not be eligible for another classroom. It is just, if you got phase 1 award, you are not eligible to apply for phase 2.
Excellent. Other questions?
Unless of course you open, maybe you had one open and one closed. The one that is closed, you may apply for the grant, because it's based on the site and the license number. So one license number can receive 1 grant.
Good distinction. Everybody seems like they're content with that.
Okay.
Eva's got a follow-up question.
Hey, Eva, just so you know, the hand raising function is not like a thing that you click on like in other platforms. It's actually, yeah, physically raising your hand. So go for it.
Okay, I'll wave next time. So I had a city program that asked me about $30 million that had been approved by the EBOR for childcare and grants, and I'm not sure if the amount number is maybe different, or if the grant is different. I'm just wanting to make sure that I follow up with them with accurate information, and I'm feeling a little unsure of where their questions are coming from.
So, Dawn, do you want me to answer that, or do you? Yeah, okay. So, CARES Act fund, $38-ish million. Those funds are good until 2023. So think about that, right? Those are both short-term and potential long-term, and we don't know, is there a second wave, a third wave? There's a long time before the vaccine, right? These e-board dollars that were approved are also part of the funding that's come from the federal government, but they're not CARES Act dollars. They're different funds, and they have a much shorter time frame during which they need to be spent. So we were awarded this $30 million. We're still getting, approval for all the different ways we would like to be able to see those dollars be able to be used in the phase 1 and phase 2. So, for example, trying to see if it's possible to retroactively increase the payment amounts for people that already were awarded, because we have access now to these additional dollars, and some other things. So I don't want to make this more confusing than it is, but yes, these dollars were also made available. We've been asked essentially the state has decided it wants to hold on to those CARES Act dollars as some sort of hedge heading into a very clearly uncertain budget picture. So swapping, I would use the word I wouldn't say that to your city person, but in essence, substituting these e-board funds for some of the CARES Act dollars. And also remember that some of the original funds we got for the CARES Act had to go to DHS to help pay for some of the policy changes that they have been implementing. So your person is correct, and we are still awaiting final approval for some of those additional changes that we're hoping will happen. As soon as we know, we'll tell you more about those.
Go ahead, Eva.
Yeah, follow up, that's fine.
I appreciate that. That helps me a lot. Just one point of clarification, just because there are so many different phase this, phase that. When you talk about phase 1, phase 2, are you talking about phase 1, phase 2 of the grant, or phase 1, phase 2 of reopen?
Yeah. So when we awarded people initially, we had to decrease the amount because we had more uptake than we had budgeted for. One of the things that we'd like to be able to do, we don't know if we're going to be able to, is to bring up those awards at least to the intended amount originally, if it's possible to do so. But we don't, as I understand it, have final approval for that yet.
Awesome. Thanks, Joan. All right. Any other questions related to the grants? Then I think we will go ahead and transition to our next item. Dawn, thank you so much. That was timely and fantastic information. Much appreciated. And so the next item here on our agenda is related to the emergency childcare dashboard on our website, and we have some data that we've been able to get up there, and I think Joan was going to highlight that a little bit. Joan, do you want me to pull that up on our shared screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Please, that'd be great. So We have been working with Western Oregon University, TRI, to use data to understand vacancies and capacities for some time. John is showing you where this is on our website. You can see it's on the COVID-19 section. And under emergency childcare, down here at the bottom where we've got the dashboard. So this information is updated every day. It's a direct feed from NACRAWare, which is primarily where this data is drawn from. And you can see top chart is state level, vacancies by essentially age group, so that folks who can kind of see at a glance what the vacancies look like, and then what the vacancies are as a % of capacity. So you can see that we're currently at whatever that is, 67% of used capacity. So that's going to be updated daily as a part of the ongoing update. And then below that, you see vacancies by county. Obviously this varies quite a bit by county. And as ever, we see challenges, particularly with infant and toddler care, which has been true. It hasn't changed during the pandemic. We're looking at this information on an ongoing basis. We're also looking at trend data, which is not on the website, as a way to help us kind of understand what's going on in terms of capacity. Below that, in the section that says dashboard data collection, John, if you want to scroll down just a little bit more so people can see that, that actually explains where the data is being drawn from, and also what the definitions are, because as those of you that work with this data also know that it's quite complex. It's not very simple. And we thought having these definitions is important. So, this is here, it's a resource. I think for the foreseeable future, we'll keep it up there. Obviously, once the state of emergency order is ultimately rescinded, there won't be any more emergency childcare. We won't need to have this dashboard, et cetera. But for the foreseeable future, it's here. And it certainly is available to you or to, people in your community that want to understand what current vacancies look like. This is something that you can direct them to. And so I think I'll just leave it there unless there's more questions. We just wanted you to be aware of it and the resource that it represents for you and others.
All right. Any questions? Yeah, Karen, go ahead.
I missed exactly how to get there. I can see the link, but
it's in the COVID-19 section of the website under emergency childcare. So if you go to our homepage, you see COVID, you click on that, and then you get a bar essentially. And if you pick emergency childcare, it's down below kind of all this administrative information related to emergency childcare.
Thank you much.
Good question. Any other questions related to the data on the website? Awesome. Thanks, Joan. And the next item on the agenda is actually related to supplies, which there really isn't necessarily a huge update related to this. We're working on sort of our next steps in phase 2 around how we will make supplies available. And I'm not wanting to necessarily put you on the spot, Joan, but I don't know if you have anything specific that you want to say about our thought process around where we're headed.
So as an interim step, which Lisa is going to talk about, we are endeavoring to essentially curate information and resources regarding supplies on our website. And of course, we would be inviting you to do the same thing on your own websites. If you have local sources for supplies, you know, as we've been doing these childcare calls now for several weeks, we continue to hear ongoing need. We are looking for the most expedient way to make essentially the sanitary and cleaning supplies most necessary to operate childcare in this time as low cost and or free as possible to childcare providers. And we're working on a procurement strategy. At this point, we are not thinking that we will be trying to do that directly through all of you. That simply just, like, the more we explored that, the more that seemed like that was just filled with pitfalls, you know, including the fact that some of you work on campus, you know, your campuses are closed. You know, these supplies, it's a large amount on a monthly basis. It could barely fit in someone's car to be taken to somebody's house in some cases. And so we're really trying to the degree feasible, figure out if there's a way for us to have people be able to have a monthly order if they're open and operating, and that we can have that monthly order delivered to them directly. We see this as I talked about last time, it's a business-related cost that no one could have anticipated when they set their tuition rates, or when they determined how much they were going to pay their staff. They couldn't have known, wow, I now have to figure out how to pay for masks and gloves and other things in more quantity than before, more cleaning, more sanitation, more hand sanitizer. So I don't have an answer. We don't have an answer yet, but we are really trying to make sure that if we have resources for supplies that either make it easier for people to find them because they can go to one place, they could have them delivered. That's our stopgap right now, is driving information towards providers so they at least know where to go, because that's what we're hearing. I can't find gloves. I can't find masks. So I would say promoting available sources on your own websites if you're not already doing that. I continue to hear that there are little local things going on where there might be free or low cost supplies being made available. So making sure providers know about those. And then I'm hoping within the next week to 10 days, I will be able to say more about this is how I think this is going to look. But we have to find a procurement strategy first. So.
Thanks for that, Joan. I think that those were all the exact words that Lisa was going to say about not necessarily in that order, but I think that is kind of the conversations that have been going on. And any questions, any other comments? I sensed a little bit of relief that you all weren't standing up warehouses in your garages at this point, so that's good. Lisa, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I would just add that, you know, there is a committee working on this, and so we should have some very detailed information for you in the coming days, probably, you know, a week or so at the most, to kind of let you know what those next steps will be. So that's all.
Can we, John, quickly show people where it is on our website? Is that possible?
Well, you have a lot of faith in me. All right, let's see.
The test. So COVID-19, it's under providers. And go all the way down where it says supplies. Yeah. So here's my other thing. If you hear of other resources that fall into the same kind of big buckets as these do, please bring those to our attention and we will put them on the website as well. So thanks, everybody.
That's great. I learned something today. I hadn't clicked on this little section yet. It was good. Karen Hinkemeyer.
The supply connector, I received that from our EOC here in Washington County, and it's kind of, I don't really understand how to navigate it best for providers. So it's one of those that I've been hesitant to send to people because it's just not very intuitive, just an FYI.
Yeah, I've been there. We looked at all these. So it's Miriam's perspective that, you know, we need to make available all the resources that we currently have. So that's why it's on here. And it's not just designed for childcare. So obviously some of these are a little bit more focused on early learning, but Business Oregon does have a list. It's pretty thorough in terms of I don't disagree, it will be more challenging. However, if people are desperate and literally can't find another source, chances are by working methodically through that, they would be able to. So I'm not saying it's perfect by any means. So.
All right. Any last questions related to supplies? All right, I'm going to move on to our next agenda item here. Thank you, Joan and Lisa. And this was an interesting opportunity that came available late last week. Childcare Aware introduced an RFP that they really wanted you guys to have plenty of time to think about how you might potentially consider applying. And Karen Hinkemeyer, I think, was one of the folks who first sort of alerted us that they were hoping possibly that the system, CCRR system, might be able to get some help. And so there was kind of a request that came forward from the coalition. And so Hannah and Margie have talked through this a little bit. And I think, Hannah, are you prepared to chat a little bit? Do you want me to pull up the link related to the grant?
No, I think I'll talk about it real quick and then I'll put it in the chat for people to read and reflect. We do have a poll for people to take to try and help us get some further direction about what the need we really need to write to is by Friday at 2 p.m. So we are wanting just as much feedback we can get from you all about what's really happening in your communities, really focusing on the equity piece around this grant that we think is really important. And so I'm gonna just talk through a few things real quick. I have some notes that I wanna make sure I highlight, and then wanted to open up to see if there are other pieces that we're missing. So for those that haven't read the grant, I'm just going to quickly talk about it. It does deal with working on getting supplies and or resources to those communities that have been disproportionately affected due to COVID. So Black, African American communities, Latino, and Native American tribal communities. And so we're looking at how we can come around and support those communities in Oregon by figuring out what types of supports would be best. And we have a team at TRI that have looked at this grant and have some ideas. And so I'm going to quickly just talk through them, and then I'm going to put a poll in the chat box here for directors to fill out about their regions, just to kind of get an idea of a potential direction that as a CCRR system we want to go for. However, we want to make sure that it is sustainable, and we do know that there may be other resources available potentially coming for PPE or tangible cleaning resources. So we're hoping to see how this can align with other work that we're currently doing, this grant does not allow for any FTE expenditure, so it's directly serviced to providers. And so we were thinking about really looking at the mental and social emotional aspect of this grant, about supporting communities, and really looking at those that have experienced systemic racism and oppression, and how we can use this to try and help support them through this pandemic. And we recognize that there has been some work around this, but wanting to really see how we can really come around providers in our state with this specifically. It is a small amount of money. You can request $10,000 to $16,000 for this grant. And so really looking at that, we may need to identify a region in our state based off of the communities and that we want to serve, and then hope to learn and pilot something, and then provide the service statewide to childcare businesses that have been negatively affected. And so really thinking about it as how we can pilot it and work with a specific region, and then from there, from what we learn, take it and adapt it statewide as it aligns with the work that we do as a CCR in our system. So those were a lot of the conversations that we've had around this grant, and really looking at how we can support it in that way. So I'm going to pause just to see if there are any questions that are coming up right now. Yes, Karen.
So when I thought about our team applying for this for just our SDA, I thought one of the areas that would be really helpful is to help support individuals who are low income and communities of color have purchased a laptop or Chromebook, etc., so that as well as an annual subscription to the internet, an internet provider, and so that they could be supported in connecting with us virtually a little bit better, as well as being able to do online training and professional development, since it's going to be over time that we're going to do this, and professional development is really important at this time. So that was just our idea.
Okay. Okay.
And Hannah, just a question related to the grant that I haven't taken a dive too far into the materials. I was just curious if they would consider at Childcare, where if someone was writing on behalf of multiple CCRNRs, because technically every CCRNR in our state could apply for this, and we could get funded for multiple opportunities, assuming that they had the resources to do that. But that might get, additional grants, larger amounts of money, kind of addressing what Karen's saying. But if we were targeting something to the effect of Karen's proposal, and all we can apply for is, between $10 and $16,000, we're not getting very far. I'm just curious if they would. I guess my real question is if they have an FAQ, if we can ask whether or not you can apply for a larger amount of money on behalf of multiple regions. But just curious.
I haven't seen that come through on the FAQ. They did adjust it to 501c3 programs. They adjusted something around that. I haven't seen anything come through on the FAQ. We did submit an email of intent to submit, so we should be getting any question that comes through, so we can pose that question. I can send it in and see if we get an answer. But no, I have not seen that come through on the FAQ at all. And they didn't say also how many grants they're trying to put out there. I see the need, Karen, and we actually talked about that, about training opportunities and translation and distance learning and those things, but it's hard to get a good impact on such a small amount of money if we do it as a statewide system versus an individual. And so we were trying to just think of a ways as a statewide system, if there was curriculum development, books, materials, resources that we could send to providers, was kind of an idea that we had really taken as something that potentially could be more sustainable as we look long term. But we did talk about the technology issue and connectivity, and that this is how providers are going to be getting their professional development for a long time, and it's a big business expense. So I am happy to submit that question. What I am going to do now is I'm going to put the poll in the chat here, and it's just a Google Doc with some questions specifically related to what they wrote to in the grant. So really trying to get us to hone in on what potential move we want to make as a system if we go forward with this. So you should see a link in the chat to a Google document. So I think if we take a couple of minutes and fill this out, it's about 5 questions, that would give us a good baseline understanding of what direction we really want to go to, whether it be supplies or supporting curriculum, and then potentially identifying a population that we want to focus on specifically.
So that sounds like that might be an opportunity for us to do that when we're taking a little break. I want to check in first. If I suggest a break, I want to see Amy, Joyce, are you, it looks like you're on the call. Are you here?
I'm here.
Are you able to hang tight for a few minutes, or would you like to get your agenda item?
No, I'm at your disposal, John.
Okay, well, then I'd like to suggest that everybody take a 5-minute break. That gives them, 30 seconds for a bio break and 4.5 minutes to fill out the survey or some other ratio of how that might roll out. But feel free to take a little break, and we'll see you back here at around 10:50. Thanks, folks.
Hey, John, we can't submit any more questions. It closed yesterday at noon
Oh,
Eastern time, so 10 a.m. our time.
that's
Oh,
interesting.
I'm sorry, 9 a.m. our time.
Well,
So,
it looks
so I
like
did see someone put in the one of the comments that if we write it and they just add in the local lens and they each submit them locally.
interesting. And there's no indication about how many grants they're planning on funding or how
Not that I saw.
their
No.
money is.
Not that I saw on their website. I'm gonna look again, but not get any sense of how many they were looking to award.
Interesting.
So John, as people hop back on, I just have a couple things I'll touch base on and give an update of what information some people have submitted.
Sounds good. All right. I see a few people have returned. And I think we will go ahead and get us restarted again. Oh, welcome, Margie. We took a break just so you could get in and be available for this next conversation. But before we jump into the agenda item that Amy Joyce was going to talk to us about, I think Hannah wanted to wrap up the conversation a little bit that we were just talking about related to the grant from Childcare. Where? Go ahead, Hannah.
Thanks, John. So I did look up quickly. The question and answer portion is closed. It closed yesterday at 9 a.m. So we missed out on that. So we can't ask any questions regarding the grant or if we submit as a statewide agency. There are the feedback from the poll, I think will be really helpful. We are meeting as an internal team at 3:30 today to walk through and kind of come to a consensus of what to write to and then connect back. What I am seeing from the poll is that 90% of participants that have completed it so far have identified the Latino community as being disproportionately impacted as the highest percentages of what you guys are seeing in your communities, and that 30% of responses have indicated that supplies are needed, and the other 90-ish% is both saying that we need some social emotional support as well as TA and professional development. Additionally, a lot of the specifics you guys are giving back really goes to the idea of professional development, curriculum, books, business supports. So I think this will be really helpful. I think we know that all of our communities are needing something right now during this pandemic. And so it's hard. I think what we'll do is I will send an email update of thoughts and a direction. But I know that everyone that has expressed interest to wanting to be a part of it. And I think we'll look to the confines of the grant in terms of identifying and looking at our data of providers and what we're seeing and see what we can work towards before Friday at 2 p.m. So look for an update from TRI on this to the directors coalition so that we can get an understanding of the best way, because every idea is valid in here and needed. So I think we'll look to what we have in the grants because they are saying innovative strategies as well as identifying a specific community and using our COVID data that we have available to us is really a key piece. So if you have any thoughts or questions, please reach out to myself, send me an email, and we can connect about other things that we may need to be aware of as we kind of move forward with this. So be on the lookout.
Thanks, Hannah. I just have to say we really appreciate the Research Institute grabbing a hold of this opportunity, even though it may be a small amount of money. I think the idea that we might create something that could then be utilized across the state in each region, going from pilot to more expanded access, I think is a great idea. But the fact that your team took this on in a couple-day turnaround and pretty much had a week to think about putting together a grant, that's pretty incredible. So thank you for doing that and being willing. And right now we want to shift gears here and move into having Amy Joyce talk to us a little bit about where things are headed with our guidance to childcare programs and where we're headed for fall and some of the work that we'll be doing. So Amy, welcome, and thanks for hanging in there with us, and hopefully you were able to multitask while we had you in the wing.
Yeah, I did. Thanks for that, John. I appreciate it. I was able to do so, and it's always good to be here with you all from the R&Rs. So, we put out this letter June 11th to all providers to update everyone on sort of the path forward and to, sort of set expectations and let people know, whether they like it or don't like it, what the, kind of what the next step is in the evolution of the emergency childcare system. And what I want to preface this with, I continue to be reminded, both by people telling me and by circumstances, that progression or easing of restrictions, or however you want to call it, is very much dependent on the continued progress on the virus and on COVID. So we have projected out, as you'll see in that second paragraph, Friday, August 14th, to have the new guidance issued. And that's going to be very much dependent, and to the contents of that will be dependent on what's happening with the virus, with new cases, hospitalizations, deaths, new cases in childcare, those sorts of things. So, all of this is contingent upon what happens in the whole scheme of things in Oregon. But, as we put this out, I'll speak a little bit about the date, and then I'll talk about the process that we intend to go through. So the date, and we've heard this a bunch from providers already, that the date feels very far out there. It's roughly, 8 to 9 weeks away. And that's quite a long time, particularly for providers who are, trying to hold on to their business, trying to hold on to their families, figure out what programming is going to look like as we approach, the school year and all that. So we recognize it feels like it's a long way out there. On the flip side of that, the process to figure out what that new guidance is going to be is it's not, I don't want to sound flip, but it's not like throwing darts at the board and saying, okay, we're going to do these things. It needs to be a very thoughtful, directive sort of, process by which we make these decisions. And so you'll see in this letter, we talk about, next week when we do our evening provider calls, we're going to be soliciting feedback from folks. The intent is for this to be a transparent process by which we put out drafts and get feedback from people on that, feedback from providers, from our internal staff, from parents, from R&Rs about, the feasibility and what's going to make a difference for people, and how these changes can impact the spread of the virus. So that's kind of the lay of the land in terms of what we plan to do. It's noted in the letter there, it's not going to be August 14th. We're back to business as usual. That's just, setting that expectation of we're not going to be back to normal on August 14th. So we need to figure out what changes are going to happen, and assuming the trajectory of the virus improves, and formerly I would have said continue to improve, but we all know that we're seeing, increases in the virus across the state in many places, even places where they really hadn't had much of a problem before. But so if we can see improvement in the virus, the hope would be that we can ease some of the restrictions. I think probably the biggest one for folks is the number of kids in the stable group. We're at 10. Can that be raised, particularly in centers, so that they can serve more families? So, families can have access to childcare, and that the providers can have a better shot at, having a bottom line on the plus side of things. So I'll stop there, and John, I'll ask you, did you have other things you wanted me to address right off the bat, or take questions? How'd you like me to do this?
Well, I think we can pause for just a moment and see if there's any questions about what you've presented so far. Anyone? I don't see the typical hand waving in front of the camera here, so it sounds like that was pretty well stated at that point. I do think that we kind of want to couple some of the information that you're providing with conversations with our CCRNRs here around how they're hoping and thinking about the work that they're going to need to do that requires some in-person contact with providers. And we want our guidance and activities with CCRNRs to align with the guidance that the Office of Childcare is putting out related to visits by licensing specialists and other ways that we might have face-to-face contact. And I know, Margie, you may want to add to this. I didn't mean to necessarily keep facilitating now that you were here for this agenda item. So feel free to add in and tag team with Amy.
I think you've got this, John.
Oh, great.
No, it's actually, yeah, this is, the bottom line is we wanted to have an opportunity to discuss, clarify, maybe hear from the directors if they're getting questions from providers, how best to support them and, interpret this latest guidance. So that's what it sounds like is happening.
Okay, let's see. My screen just shifted. Oh, Taya, and then Heather. Taya.
This is a whole other can of worms, so I don't know if you guys are actually ready to answer this yet, but what comes to mind when I see this is the questions we're starting to get from preschool promise applicants. And if preschool promise, it seems like we'll need to be operating as emergency child care, and you know what those restrictions on numbers of kiddos are going to look like and how that's going to impact preschool promise. So I don't expect anybody to have an answer to that right now, but there's definitely a lot of curiosity going around about, you know, when folks are going to hear and how that works with the emergency childcare guidelines.
Thanks, Taya. That is a huge consideration. I don't know if we are able to dive into that right now. Amy, I don't know if you guys have had any discussions around what it means for the publicly funded programs specifically.
Yeah, so I may not be the best person on the call to speak to that. I mean, what I will say is we are really diving into later today, diving into a cross-team look at, you know, building out this plan of what this is going to look like. So from, you know, all these perspectives, right? What's it going to take for licensors to go out into the field? What's it going to take, you know, and what does the right number look like? What are the implications for preschool promise and other things? So we do have a cross team looking at this. And I don't know if, Joan, I'll call on you to see if you have you're on that cross team. So,
yeah, I think the only other thing I probably could add would be that, you know, obviously it's going to be a consideration. I mean, people's common sense is not wrong, right? We can't operate school like we used to. We can't operate childcare like we used to. We can't operate pre-K necessarily like we used to. So we do anticipate being able to do the intent to awards before August 14th, clearly. Actually, you know, ideally, we will know more about that, you know, in the nearer term than the far term. But I just asked actually as of last night, so at our COVID leadership team, and there is not an update on a status of when we will be able to tell about the intent to awards. So, I mean, we're obviously tracking it very closely and know that people are extremely eager to understand whether or not they're going to be awarded. And I think that is going to be, I'll put it this way, the beginning of the journey in terms of understanding what Preschool Promise and the other publicly funded programs will look like, just like it is really as we head forward with childcare.
Thanks for that, Joan. And Heather, you had your hand raised.
Yeah. I just can't help but think about when the school year, we have several different school districts in our communities, and they're all trying to determine how they're going to provide their process, if some of it can be in person, or some children are going to go 2 days and some children are going to go half days, and they can all decide to do different things. And our childcare system was built over a really long period of time, and I know there's going to be several adjustments just regarding how are they going to get care on those days off, and how that fits into the child care that is very slight when we go into the fall. So I guess I'm just thinking ahead a little bit about the many different ways that we're going to see school roll out in the fall, and the care that can or cannot be provided. And I'm sure certain people are thinking about those kinds of things, but I'm just thinking about what kind of technical assistance I can give the providers, about really having to rethink how they provide that care if they're after August 14th, if they can have more children. I don't know. I just think there's going to be a collision in the fall as more parents are going back to work and less school is available.
Well, I do think that more people going back to work presumes, as Amy was saying, like continued progress, and I think we're seeing evidence in our own state of actually increased transmission right now. So I don't want to be a naysayer, But we are living in a time when the virus, I mean, we still are in a global pandemic. We have increased transmission rates right now in our own state. So I do think it is unavoidable, Heather, and of course Amy can weigh in on, in the sense that we are all adjusting to a new reality that we can't even see that far ahead. It's like we have in some ways a candle to see forward, and so you can only see so far as compared to like a high beam searchlight where, you know, you can see much farther ahead. Like we do have to deal with the reality as we're experiencing now, and it's one of the reasons why we're taking such a thoughtful process with this next round of guidance, is we're really trying to use all the best information that we have at this time, and it's still going to be challenging. So
yeah, and if I can add on to that a little bit, Joan. So two things come to mind in terms of timing. So one is that we have this date of August 14th, but then I talked about how this is going to be this very transparent process and putting out drafts and getting feedback. So this is not a situation where on August 14th, there's going to be this big surprise reveal and everybody's going to learn on that day what things look like. It's going to be, you know, a progression with engagement, and people will have probably a very good idea quite a bit before August 14th what it's likely going to look like. So there's that in terms of timing. The other piece of timing is I've already gotten quite a few contacts from providers saying some version of the schools have released their guidance, and you're not going to release your guidance until August 14th. And I think what folks are not understanding or appreciating right now is, at least my understanding of the school guidance that has come out, is that the ODEs put out something of a framework, but then each school by school or district by district is going to create a plan, which
Amy?
Yeah.
Amy, this is Margie. Can I interrupt for just a minute and ask everyone who's not talking to mute? We're hearing some conversation going on in the background.
Hey, Margie.
Yeah.
So,
Margie,
yeah?
I'm just going to mute everyone and then Amy can unmute.
Great, thanks. So, so I think when folks are thinking, you know, we're not putting our guidance out till August 14th, and the schools have already put out their guidance, neither of those is really truly the situation or the date. Ours is going to be, you know, folks are going to have a very good idea before that. August 14th is the date we put out the official guidance, all translated, all, you know, ready to go. And school by school, you know, their plans aren't due out until like August 15th, I believe, school back. So that's not to minimize people's concern that it is going to be a little while, but just to know in terms of the accuracy of how these things play out, it's not as if parents know right now what school is going to look like in the fall. They absolutely do not. So anyway.
Heather?
Yeah. I guess I was also thinking about what had been put out to schools about the potential of them having to, if there was not enough care to be found, of whether or not they would have to have some groups of 10 at their sites as well. So I didn't know if that was still in the mix. Just throwing it out there. Most of them, our schools have closed us, so.
So I'm not sure if I'm supposed to answer that, John. So is the question roughly, are schools going to be providing childcare if that's needed in their area? I mean, is that what that boils down to?
Yes, that's what I'm asking.
I don't know that we have an answer to that right now. You know, I think I have heard that some superintendents are indicating that there may be childcare at some schools, but I think that's very much not decided yet.
I think
Just like this is just a super tiny little anecdote, but the school district my kids go to sent out a survey, and it definitely said, if we take this model, will you need help with childcare? So I know they're at our schools, they're at least trying to they're interested in that and taking a pulse on it.
Right.
and I along those lines and what Carrie Wells put in the chat box there, I think it'll be hugely important as you're working closely with your school districts to help them think about the ramifications of the decisions they're trying to make. And I know they're not I know they're all smart people, but I think sometimes when they're looking at factors like we have to use every inch of usable space in our school to separate students and have classes, and that means that our preschool promise location here or our community preschool or whatever else type of childcare they might have had in their space may be in jeopardy of being asked to go find alternate space. And if school classes are changing hours and operating, kids are in different days and out different days, then we also have to potentially, for parents, try and locate care for children and that are, out of school at times they wouldn't normally have been out of school. So I think just making sure as much as possible that you're engaged in those conversations in your communities or have a pulse on what the conversations are is going to be important. And then also being able to bring that back to us statewide so we can think through what are our options, what do we have as resources, and how do we help traverse this situation, because it's truly it could be different and could be all of those things in certain communities or completely different things. So the fact that some of the districts are actually thinking through this stuff in advance and asking families what their childcare needs are is a stellar way to start. Any other questions for Amy? Yes, Hannah.
I just had a random question when it comes to group size and registered family versus certified family, if there's been any kind of conversation around providers that were CS changing license type, and if that can happen now. I've heard some rumblings in communities about providers that are certified family wanting to change to registered family because of this. And if there's a process for that, or if they should just contact their licensor because of the loss of those extra additional potentially 6 slots.
So I will say that I have not heard that about folks wanting to, or use this term loosely, sort of downgrade from CF to RF. What I have heard is about providers wanting to sort of go up from RF to CF and inquiring about how we can, get visits done so they can get through that process. I haven't heard that. I'd be curious to hear more. If you want to shoot me an email, or if you want to try to have that conversation now.
I can shoot you an email and then just see some points that I've seen. A lot of it has been on community Facebook pages of providers. I've seen it a couple of times. So I will shoot you an email.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Other comments, questions? It looks, I see in the chat box, and I think that's Shannon.
It's actually me, John. It's Jenna.
Jenna, you're hiding.
I know. I'm trying not to overload the video. I just had a conversation with the center director yesterday about the feasibility of them even taking school-age children and the whole issue of transport. And I hadn't had that conversation with anybody before then, and I just think is an important thing to think about is that they may not be able to transport before and after school children, or, you know, off hour children or whatever. And that may put a whole different level of pressure on the system. And I just think it's an important thing to just be aware of.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I can speak a little bit to that. So we have not put out child care specific transportation guidelines. I'm not sure that we will. We did just this week, this week it's Tuesday, just like Friday or Monday, I think we put up on our FAQs on the website information about transportation in terms of what guidance. So I will find that and I will shoot it to John and Margie so they can get that out to you. So that's what I've got on transportation, but we recognize that yeah, it's another layer, at least, you know, from the regulatory side, it's another layer of how are we going to get this done, but do it in a way that's safe and healthy.
Thanks for that, Amy. Any other questions related to the current subject? All right, I think our conversation is going to kind of continue along the same lines here, but I just want to stop and say a big thanks to Amy for her continued engagement on these weekly calls. And I know that she's been learning and gleaning a lot from the conversations with childcare providers on almost a daily basis. You get a couple of evenings off throughout the week, which I'm sure is plenty. But I think your wealth of knowledge and bringing that to our system partners here is really helpful. So thank you so much.
Great, yeah, you bet.
And Margie, do you want me to just keep babbling a little bit about what we want to gather, or did you want to speak to?
John, that's code for take over, Margie, please.
I hate hearing myself talk.
No.
No big deal.
No, it's great. Yeah, I can go ahead and just kind of frame up this next section. So we do know that counties are opening in different ways throughout the state. And as has been said in the past, or in this meeting a few times, and we know that cases of COVID-19 are increasing as the state opens. And we also know that some counties have actually been put on pause. So we want to revisit the conversation around face-to-face trainings or face-to-face gatherings that are happening. So with Amy here, what we'd like to do is go to each of you, and I can call out your region, and if you would share with us what trainings for providers face-to-face are happening, whether you are leading those or not. So for example, we did hear some community colleges are offering CPR first aid, or different groups are offering CPR first aid. So if you could share that, or any plans you may have for gatherings of networks or other trainings. So, and if you have none, just share none. And just to have a better understanding of the purpose around this, Amy will be listening, maybe asking some clarifying questions, and with that, she can take it back to the team and talk through what is the state guidance we want for the face-to-face gatherings, timing and approach. So, Amy, did you want to add anything more to that?
No, I think that sums it up nicely. Thanks, Margie.
Okay, great. Thank you. So any questions, clarifying questions before I start calling you out? No, I can't see everybody. So if you want to just call out, that would be great. If you have a question.
I didn't see any hands waving.
Okay, thanks, John. One more thing before we start. It is okay if you enter it into the chat, but we are going to ask everyone to state it so everyone can hear, and if there are questions, we can address them as we go along. So let's start with Christine in Multnomah.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. We're not doing anything face-to-face. Multnomah has not entered phase 1. So there's nothing allowed right now. I will say we do have one contractor that has her own CPR first aid business. And we do contract with her to do the hybrid. And I believe she also serves Clackamas and Washington County, but they can correct me if that's not true. And she does have her own training center, and I believe she's doing very small groups of like 2 people at a time with barriers in place, but we have not been sending people to her just because it's still not quite safe, in our opinion, to do that. And so our guidance has just been nothing in person. The college is, of course, reviewing the guidance that just came out from HEC. And so they are, right now, fall classes are also online. And so we are following what they decide to do and just kind of watching what the virus does, because with the recent spikes, we just don't know.
Okay, great, Christine, thank you. Okay, Shannon, Marion Polk Yamhill.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So right now, we're not doing any face-to-face. However, we're really been asking about the hybrid second part, IRF and orientation. Those are the only ones that we've gotten a lot of people who are wanting access. Although the orientation, we've developed the packet system and a training system. Mostly it's the IRF and the hybrid part 2. I know they extended the days, but we get calls constantly on, when am I going to expire? When are we going to do the hands-on? So most of our training is all online right now. But otherwise, those are the only ones that I've heard about, unless Jenna has another say.
I was just going to say that we are in the process of planning weekly statewide webinars through the end of December right now. So
okay.
That's what we're working on.
Okay,
and I'm sorry,
great.
Could you guys remind me what part of the state you're in there?
Marion Polk Yamhill.
Marion Polk Yamhill, thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you, Shannon and Jenna. So Karen Hinkemeyer, Washington.
I'm unmuted. Okay, I am unmuted. Okay, we are not doing anything face-to-face, and we have not been approved as our agency to allow clients onto any of our sites. So we are not providing anything face-to-face at this time. We are hoping that we can work with our first aid and CPR vendor to have them do the hands-on portion at a site that they can do, but that hasn't been figured out yet. And there's no time that that's been possibly approved. So we're looking at maybe never, depending on the pandemic, right?
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Karen. Okay, Clackamas, Sarah or Paula? I'm not sure which one of you wants to share.
Yeah, so we are in similar boats as Multnomah and Washington. Our agency is exploring how to reopen to allow people from outside the agency into the building, utilizing social distancing to do in-person trainings. Paula's been working closely with our hybrid CPR partner to see about doing in-person CPR trainings at their facility. But at this time, we're really focused on utilizing the statewide webinars and our own webinars to do training as we move forward.
Okay. So you two are offering no face-to-face at this point?
Correct.
Okay, great. Thank you. So Eva, Clatsop, Tillamook, and Columbia.
Yeah, so we also are not offering any face-to-face. And I would say that getting to a space where we can has been a giant part of conversation with my team and also with our backbone agency. We have providers who we've been accessing Jenna's statewide webinars entirely for our providers, and we do have providers that are not able to access that. So I'm trying to figure out how we can prioritize and have some guidelines for small group face-to-face has been a real focus for us. Our backbone agency also covers Washington County, and we cannot open any of our buildings until Washington County is also open. So our conversation is turned to how can we do this in other public spaces? Can we do the one-on-one training for somebody that needs it for license renewal in a parking lot? We're just really struggling with how do we get training to people that need it right now that are not able to access the webinars. We're also thinking about first aid CPR. We have scheduled some face-to-face trainings in July, but also really hoping to have a process in place that our backbone agency will approve. And I would say that early learning division guidance around how to do that would be super helpful for us to be able to offer what providers are needing right now.
Great, thank you, Eva. So you're really targeting that group who do not have access to the internet and can get onto the webinars. And
yeah, I mean,
okay.
I think as we think about who doesn't have technology available to them, who doesn't have access to online, period, how do we do that with people in small groups? We also have some providers that maybe could access webinars, but they're not comfortable taking in information that way, and we want them to take in the information, right? So how do we get them training so they can learn from it? The other concern is really around the first aid CPR, and we do have people that are struggling with that as well too. So we do have some things scheduled out there that we'll cancel if we need to, but we'd really like to get to a space of how can we, and what does that look like?
Okay, thank you, Eva. Lynn Benton Lincoln, Jerry or Lynette?
Hey, so Lynette, you can add to this, but we are not offering, we're in a community college, and we are not offering any in-person classes. We do our own first aid CPR, so right now we're in the hybrid with a huge list of people who need to do the hands-on piece. We have reached out to our healthcare division to look to see what guidelines they are putting in place so that they can do some lab kind of work, but it seems like we're a ways away from that at this point. Lynette, what else? You need to unmute. Technology, this is a problem.
Lynette, if you want to go ahead and enter it in the chat box, that's fine. I'll pull it up. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Jerry. I'm imagining the community colleges will all have a similar story, which brings us to Lane. Taya Joslin?
Yes, definitely a similar story. I think it was Christine who mentioned that HEC released their guidelines yesterday, but that's going to be a really long process. I think that the college doesn't even have to turn anything in until September 1st, and then the state makes some decisions, I think, at the end of September, if I have those timelines right. So just an idea about how long it'll be until we actually hear anything. But even then, there, you know, the minimums that what the state wants, and then the fact that Lane is really approaching this with pretty extreme caution. We already know that we'll be fully remote in the fall. I don't see that changing going into the winter, but I suppose we'll see. They're bringing on some of the CTE programs like aviation tech and mechanics, people who absolutely have to be on campus. And, you know, with our staff, all signs point towards us being in what Lane has determined to be phase 3, and that's kind of different within the college, and that would be when there's a vaccine. So we're anticipating being remote for a long time. The piece about first aid CPR is that there are other folks in the community who we've referred people to in the past, so that is definitely available here, and we've made a pretty smooth transition to distance learning. Of course, it will be nice when we get back face-to-face with providers, but we also have some people who have reasons not to on our staff, quite a few of the people. So that's kind of where we're at. And then I would say also, it would be good to know, and I think I asked about this at the last meeting or maybe the one before, but I was under the impression that the ELD was still not wanting us to do in-person professional development. So if that has changed, that would be helpful to know too, because we may eventually be able to make a case. But right now, it's like from every side, it looks like no. So we're not at this point, you know, pushing against anything. We're just kind of following the directives from every direction. There's a lot of directions, but yeah.
Thank you, Taya. And that is correct. The last guidance we gave was no face-to-face. So yeah, you are correct. Nothing has come out since then. I believe that guidance was verbal. Amy, correct me if I'm wrong. And with the changes of the counties opening, we just want to have really good, clear statewide guidance. And so knowing that in some places, for example, the community agencies offering CPR first aid are starting to open back up again and offer them following CDC guidance. We just want to really zone in and hear what's going on in your in your regions. Amy, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I mean, I think that's right, Margie. And, you know, especially with, you know, now the pause that the governor has instituted, you know, I think we all need to be pausing and being very thoughtful. But I do think, you know, we need to be addressing this, and two, you know, this might be something, Margie and John, if you're willing to receive, or if people want to send it to me, I'm very curious about people's perspective on allowing CPR for it to count, so to speak, without a hands-on element. So I know that's not how we do things normally, and is not ideal. But as we hear about, you know, as this goes on a long time, and we have people who cannot get in to do hands-on, and a number of you said, you know, it's going to be a while. You know, what are our options? And one of those options would be to allow a exclusively online CPR first aid. And I'm curious what people think about that, because I think we need to, you know, make a conscious choice about that. So
I just wanted to chime in real quick.
Go ahead, John.
Amy, and say I think that that's good forward thinking, because I think that backlog is going to bite us really, really hard when the pandemic state of emergency is lifted, and they have 60 days to get that follow-up component. we may just need to address a more lengthy consideration for face-to-face, or something to the effect of this online portion will be enough for this certification go around. But I would love to hear from the CCRNRs as to their thoughts on that.
Thank you. I'd like to suggest if you have ideas about that now, please go ahead and enter those in the chat box, and then John, Lisa, and I can follow up with continued email conversations around that. And then what we can do is continue with the regions and share your thoughts around the CPR first aid ideas as we go through this. So that brings us to Coos Curry and Taya or Danae.
Hello. Yeah, community college, we don't have anything face-to-face scheduled ever again. We don't have a clear sense of when that might be allowed to happen, but our college has scheduled some CTE college courses face-to-face for fall. So they do have some plans for reopening, but not for community ed, which we fall under. So
okay.
At this time, we don't have any face-to-face trainings planned, but they are willing to sort of work with us on that. I was told if we have to start doing face-to-face trainings, they will try to work with us to make that happen. We don't have a CPR plan at this time. John helped us figure out some things with our trainer, but we just don't have a hybrid option. And our CPR course, we don't do CPR ourselves, but it's done on the college campus by an instructor at the college. And he can't do it because he's a college instructor. So our CPR usual setup isn't happening, and we don't have a hybrid option. But I was just talking to a couple of centers about this, and what I've heard is that they have connections with other trainers, CPR first aid trainers, who are doing face-to-face trainings for them. But that just concerns me a little bit because I don't know that they're, following all the protocol that we would want to know that they were following to make sure that providers are safe in those classes. So we're doing online training, online conference this Friday and Saturday.
Yeah, looking forward to hearing how that goes.
Me too.
Okay, thank you, Taya. So Heather, Douglas, Klamath, and Lake.
Okay, so we've been doing the webinars offered through Marion Polk, and so we currently do not have any face-to-face classes as per the ELD request. The UCC is the college that they are offering first aid CPR, and I was actually in my first in-person meeting with my department yesterday with social distancing, and community ed was there communicating that they were following all of the rules regarding first aid CPR and the processes that they had to make that a safe opportunity. And I let them know I was still waiting to hear back on whether or not that was going to be acceptable even still. And I had mentioned, of course, that I can't stop them from offering those classes, of course, and from people taking them. We have a provider that is going to take it. And then really to Ava's point in there, also that I think that's the only question I have is if they are going to take it, that is something we would normally pay for. So I don't know if that appears that we're supporting it if we care for our providers that way. A few days ago, we were having a conversation about our Spanish providers that are looking to complete and looking for options there. We don't have an online option for them. So that's a concern to us, and Jill's working on that. Let's see, UCC is doing the same thing with CTE programs, really determining what they can have there, even with some community ed. Their summer camps all went online, but I guess the reason why I'm bringing that up is just in general, they're asking us to submit what it would look like for us to have things that were in person. truly, I'd love to see our orientation and overview go to that, because usually we have less than 6 participants in a pretty large room that we can social distance in. So that's what that looks like for us. I guess everything has to be submitted though. So if we all wanted to come back and work in our office, or if it was determined that that was safe, it has to go through a committee and all that. So they're heavily looking at the regulations that have already been put out and putting all those requests into it. Just a little side note, all of our practicum is done in person at childcare provider sites. So it's definitely getting challenging to do placements for practicum.
Okay. Thank you, Heather.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm not sure if Mary Wolf is on. Jackson Josephine is next. I think she is not here today. I think it's some very similar stories. She's with the ESD, and I do believe the community college is offering some CPR first aid, or not the community college, I'm sorry, an outside agency. So something very similar. All right, Nancy, Patton, Gilliam, Hood River, Sherman, Wasco, and Wheeler. How about that? I'm looking at it. That's why I could call it out. I'm looking at the list.
I'm so impressed, Margie.
I have to read it.
So Columbia Gorge Community College has canceled all online classes through fall term, and that includes community ed, so that includes us. We've canceled all of our face-to-face trainings, and we are very grateful for Shannon and Jenna and Danny for all of their work on online classes, and are really excited that they're going to try to help us meet our college timeline by scheduling through the end of the year all of the online classes. So bless you, thank you. We are in a real bind, as Taya is. We do not do first aid CPR ourselves. We've always relied on the college to do that. Obviously, college instructors are not offering first aid CPR at this time. I continue to stay in touch with our nursing department and community ed department to see if those will start up. We also do not do the hybrids, so our providers are calling a lot because this is becoming an issue. So,
Okay.
and I think doing first aid CPR online is a viable option, but it's not an option for anyone who doesn't speak English, because none of them are available in any other languages. So something we need to keep in mind.
Thank you, Nancy. And just to clarify, you said that your college also canceled all online classes?
No, all face-to-face classes.
Face-to-face through
all
fall.
face-to-face classes are canceled through fall, and they did that a month ago. So it's in place.
Okay. Thank you, Nancy. All right. Karen Prow, Crook, Deschutes, and Jefferson.
We're doing everything online. We're not doing anything in person. We do our own CPR and first aid classes, and we do have access to the hybrid. So we're just paying for that hybrid class for everyone right now, since we don't know what's going to happen with that. I do have a staff member who sent me an email yesterday and had done the math of, if we don't offer the in-person portion and we keep going through August, just offering the online piece, that it will take us 5 weeks of offering the hybrid 5 days a week to get caught up. And so it's really overwhelming, because I can't say that it's anyone's favorite class to teach. It's one of those classes that people do it because they know how important it is, and we do form relationships with people. teaching the class, but I don't know that anyone really enjoys doing it even twice a week. And so that piece of it is actually starting to get a little bit overwhelming for staff. And I've had a couple of people that do teach the class say, what are we going to do about this? Because this can't be my whole job, getting us caught up on this. So I appreciate the fact that it's on people's mind.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Okay, that brings us to Eastern. Toby, so Baker, Grant, Harney, Malheur, Morrow, Union, Umatilla, and Wallowa. I have the list in front of me.
Hospitals are doing CPR. Independent contractors are doing CPR. School district has one of the school districts in one of my hubs is providing some in-person classes for their summer institute. In small groups of 6 to 10. Participants are asked to wear a face mask and sign in, take temperature and stuff. Our agency is working towards, they're going to start providing, because they have the teachers and stuff to the Head Starts, they're going to start providing small groups of training where the main trainer zooms into the small groups from different, like all the different locations. We are in the same boat. I don't offer the hybrid because I couldn't find it on Medic, but we're in the same boat that everybody is going to backlog with all the, I think we have 25 people right now needing that, not including my own staff that have to renew, and that my staff are instructors. So we're all in the same boat, but we did have new equipment that we could use that would be safer than the old equipment if we had to. Some counties, like I said, they're allowing people to come in one at a time. We've asked providers if they desperately need us to make an appointment with us for us to meet them on their porch or outside 6 feet away if they need materials or do a porch drop off, because I think that mental health piece and that connection with other adults besides their families, but even on our providers are doing awesome. They have the sign on the door where parents have to stay outside. So we have that barrier 6 feet away. We have our mask, and our agency is offering masks to everybody's going to have a mask at work. And luckily our offices, we're more than 6 feet apart because everybody's in their own office. So they don't have to worry about that. But they're wanting us to come up with a plan on in-person trainings because the agency is going to move forward with or without us on what they're going to do. Just because the school districts are already planning their summer institutes, conscious discipline, the hubs are planning their stuff, they're planning trainings starting in July, and they're going to provide masks and safety precautions and practice social distancing. And like I said, our providers are wanting that contact. Our network providers want us to come and do an outside story time on the other side of their fence with a chair 6 feet away from the fence with the kids on the other side, socially, like practicing all that. But because they're needing us, they're wanting that contact and that support to know that we're still there, because the phone calls aren't enough. The emails aren't enough.
Thank you, Toby. I did have one question. You said that so the trainings, actually a couple questions just to clarify, the trainings are being offered by Head Start, your lead agency, correct? For your teachers in July.
In July, that's the hub. The hub's offering us.
Okay.
With the school at multiple locations in small groups. Okay. They're offering that, okay. And then the other school district and the other hub is offering in person, in small groups, and online. And then the agency's planning for August. Breaking it up in groups and practice social distancing and supplying the PPE. And making sure everybody's 6 feet apart, and if there's lunches, everything's individually wrapped, temperatures are checked. Like they're going every practice, like all the guidelines for being open, because we're supposed to be 50% open as an agency by July 8th.
Okay.
Where people are starting to come in to the facilities. So, like I said, in some of the hubs, they're already offering classes. The hospitals are offering CPR and first aid. Independent contractors are offering that. We're trying to do, as CCRR, we're doing a lot by Zoom or phone calls, but the providers still want that porch visit, like 6 feet away, just to, or on the other side of the fence. outside if the weather's good, to be outside, just to have a quick, 10-minute visit, a story, a song and dance for the kids, just to keep their minds off what's going on. And my staff practice social distancing, have their masks. I think one of the staff made a clear one so they can still see her mouth when she's talking.
They can see her mouth.
So she can do the songs on the other side of the fence. She sent me, they took a picture. She was literally 6 feet on the other side of the fence, and the kids, you could tell there was a lot of distance, just so the kids can have something different. But we're not doing anything in person.
Okay.
We do have a lot of providers be on the door because they see our cars at the office, and we have the front door locked.
Okay.
They want, concerned about their application that they submitted prior to COVID being approved for licensing, want to know what we can do to help them get going, and because they see our cars there, because there's half staff are there Monday, Wednesday, the other half Tuesday, Thursday.
Okay.
So, but agency Eastern Oregon's coming up with ideas and problem solving on how to best support everybody in the community, and everything's been put into place.
Great. Well, thank you, Toby. That was a good description of everything happening in that large region. And I'm seeing a lot of great comments in the chat, which we will definitely forward on to Amy so she can have all of that information. And also we'll make sure that we reach out to you to give some of those of you who maybe have not responded and just want to think through it a little bit for more information on ideas around this. So is there anything else, Amy, Joan, John, Lisa, anything else you want to add?
I saw Taya Jocelyn waving her hand a little bit.
Just a very quick thing that other people talking made me think of. Most of our trainers are actually non-credit instructors / independent contractors. So the other layers, they have to be willing to come back to teach in person, and we don't have to for that.
Right.
Yeah,
and I'll just say that we are going to be exploring what is happening with the early learning hubs, because they were also directed not to be engaging in in-person activities. So I'm interested to hear that that's happening. Thanks for the update on that, Toby. So stay tuned. No one is trying to disadvantage you guys. Everything we're doing is for your safety, your staff safety, and the safety of childcare providers. As eager as people are to be together, we do not want to put people at risk. And I understand there's a lot of practices we can engage in to keep people as safe as possible, but we need to really think about that, especially if we're bringing people together and then they're going back into childcare. So that is a whole other group of people they're getting exposed to. And I think we just have to be really thoughtful about that. So Amy can make her own comments if she wants to.
No, I think you're right, Joan, and I, appreciate all the work that you all are doing and trying to figure out how to make this work. And that's why I really appreciate you giving me that feedback, because we need to find solutions. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Christine had one comment she wants to make about risk, and then I think we can come to a close. Go ahead, Christine.
I just wanted to say that I appreciate the guidance and thoughtfulness of all of these conversations. I have a current staff member, not funded by ELD, but and she actually is quite sick with COVID right now, in addition to her husband. And she was planning on, we have some local funds that we're trying to get. Anyway, she was trying to, was about to go and just kind of do porch drop-offs to some of her providers because she didn't know she had it. And so we were almost at the point of allowing that, which would have potentially spread directly to these childcare providers. And so I'm just encouraging everybody to take a deep breath and recognize that the threat is still there. And I just want to thank you for really taking this seriously and spending time thinking about all the different options and how nothing is ideal right now, but that everyone's protection should be first.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks for all of your work. Thank you, Amy, for hanging in there with us and listening to what's happening and providing the guidance. So everyone have a great rest of your day, and thanks again. It's good to see you all. Bye.